Console apps are incredibly useful. From running simple applications to executing automated tasks, console apps are a really valuable application type. However, they don't come with any existing code, which means you need to build out anything you want. One common feature developers end up wanting is access to a settings file. In this video, I'm going to show you how to add an appsettings.json file and a user secrets file to your console app. We'll go over how to set it up, how to access the data inside of it, and what the best practices are around using these files. Now, before we dive in, I want to share a few things with you. First, if you're interested in improving your C# skills, be sure to subscribe to this channel. With over 650 C# videos and counting, it's the perfect place to learn and grow your skills. Second, if you're looking for free C# resources, head over to iamtimcorey.com and check out the resources tab. You'll find my podcast, the C# projects page, and much more. Third, if you're ready for a deeper dive into a specific C# topic, I have a variety of courses that can help. Not only will you receive a world-class education, but you'll also help fund my free content so that everyone can have a great education in C#, not just those who can afford it. So let's jump right in to see how to set up app settings in a console app. So let's start by creating a new project, and we're going to create a console app, which I have filtered down a C# console, and that's the console app right here, which is a cross-platform application type. I'm going to call this our settings demo, and we'll call this settings demo app. We hit next. Let's change this repo to the practice. And we're going to say .NET 8 for long-term support. We are going to use top-level statements. I know this is confusing. When it says do not, it means turn off top-level statements, which we're not going to turn off. Therefore, we don't check the box. I know it's confusing. And we're not going to deal with native AOT publish. That's something separate we don't need to deal with for today's video. Let's hit create. And when we do, we're going to get a console app that has one code comment and one line of code, and that's it. So this is not much. In fact, we're going to get rid of that anyway. So we're going to start off with a blank slate. This is our program.cs. It has nothing in it. And the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that we add the NuGet packages necessary for the tasks we're going to do. So let's right-click on dependencies and say manage NuGet packages. And under browse, notice installed right here, no packages found. There's nothing installed currently. So under browse, we're going to look for Microsoft.extensions.configuration. Whoops. And we'll get rid of .user secrets. So remember this filter because we're going to actually install multiple from here. Might want to copy it. But we're going to start with Microsoft.extensions.configuration. This allows us to work with the configuration for our different settings files. And we're only going to choose a couple here, but we need to make sure we have the configuration installed. Next up, we're going to, hit apply. We're going to choose the Microsoft.extensions.configuration.json because we're going to access appsettings.json and user secrets. So therefore, we need to, but specifically for appsettings.json, we need to have the JSON configuration NuGet package installed. We hit apply. You can say don't show us again, and it will not show up again. We also need to install the binder. This allows us to access our settings more easily and allows us to have a better way of calling the settings. It's easier. We hit apply. And finally, what we're going to do is look for user secrets, which I'm not sure, right down here. There we go. User secrets as well. So Microsoft extensions.configuration.user secrets, we hit install. And some of you by now may be saying, wow, that's a lot of packages. That's so bloated. It's actually the opposite of bloated because in .NET Framework, all this stuff would have been included in the framework, which made the framework huge. And we don't always need this stuff. So what Microsoft did was they said, let's do the opposite approach. Let's not put hardly anything into .NET Core, except what's absolutely necessary. And then we'll allow you to add the things you want back in. That way, we don't have to add in things like environmental variables because we're not going to use that in today's video, or command line, or extensions, or and the other things that that we might need key vault. We don't need those things because we're not using those, so therefore we don't install them as opposed to them always being installed. Now you can see that they're installed by clicking on Settings Demo, the project, and you will see that we have package references for 4 different packages now. In fact, if you were already done this once and you decide to create a new console app, you can just copy this and paste it into your project file of another project. It will install all 4 of those packages for you automatically. So you don't have to go through the find the packages route every time if you know which packages they are. Just note that the version numbers are specified here. So if you want to, if a new version comes out, for example, the binder has an 8.0.1, because there's a small tweak to that package, to the 8.0 package, you will make sure that you get the latest versions when you start off to make sure you have all the bug fixes that may have come out since the major release came out. Okay, so now we have our packages installed. Let's go ahead and create our appsettings.json. And to do that, Control-Shift-A brings up the Add New Item dialog, and we can specify appsettings.json. We add, and now we have our appsettings.json, which is empty at the moment. So I'm going to put something in here. Let's go with user, and we're going to create an object in here, and we'll say first name, and we'll say Tim, and last name is Corey. This is just sample information to show you that we could include data in our appsettings.json. We could also include something simple like starter count value and say 5. Okay, this is just, again, sample information to show off that we can access this data in here. So what we're going to do now is come back over here. Oh, one more thing before I forget. I often forget this until you go to run this. If you select, and I've got the properties down here, but if you select appsettings.json, go to properties, we see that we have the do not copy. Change that to copy if newer. So now that will copy that file into the build directory if it's newer. So notice it also changes in the CS proj file to say the appsettings.json file, copy to output directory and preserve the newest. So that's a change it makes, but doing that allows us to make sure we always have that appsettings.json with our executable file. Otherwise, the executable file won't be able to find appsettings.json and it will error out. Okay, so now we can go into our program.cs and start writing code. So let's start with a builder. So we're going to say builder equals new configuration builder. And notice it's going to add a using directive. And we can actually, I could just accept this, but I'm not going to. I'm going to say add the using directive when I hit the control dot here. There's the using directive. I could accept the suggestion here, but I'm not going to. I want to do it by hand manually to show you what this might look like. So we can say set base path. And what it's going to do is going to say, hey, I want to set the base path of where these files might be. And the base path, really by default, should be the same directory as your current executable, which is directory.getCurrentDirectory. So it's saying, hey, let's start looking for these files in the current directory we're in. And then I'm going to say add JSON file, and we're going to say appsettings.json, and we're also going to say optional is true. All right. So what this does is, and we can also do the reload on change. It's fine. We don't typically have to reload a console app because of the fact that a console app typically doesn't have a long lifespan. It runs and it reads the settings, it runs the application, and then it closes out. So we wouldn't have to necessarily reload on change, but that can be fine for larger applications. Okay, so this is going to look for the appsettings.json. Notice there's no path here because it's already setting the base path as our current directory. So now we've got this builder that is going to load appsettings.json. And now we can come down here and say iConfiguration and say, let's say config equals builder.build. So what this builder does, this is a configuration builder. We're saying, hey, go ahead and build that and put that here. And that will give us our configuration. Now, if you are used to, let's say, ASP.NET Core, where we're building web apps, we have this kind of built into dependency injection. We don't have to do this. We just ask for an iConfiguration. But in our case, we have to build the configuration builder because we don't have dependency injection. And that's OK. We don't have to. So in this case, we've got the configuration. Now we can do something with it. So let's say console.writeLine, and we're going to say config.getValue. And let's say we're going to get a string value. No, let's get an integer value first. And we're going to ask for, I forget the name of it, but let me go ahead and copy it because that's easier. The starter count value. And we'll just copy that number and paste it out to the console. And let's put our console.readline at the end here. This is not necessary if you run it inside of Visual Studio, because Visual Studio will stop the application from closing so you can read the console. But if you run the executable outside of Visual Studio, then it will close immediately unless you have this console read line, which honestly, for most automation systems, you don't want that console read line because of the fact that it does stop the application from closing. And automations are supposed to be run without user input. So let's run this and just see the number that pops up, hopefully. So let it run, wait for it. And we have this console and it says 5. And we hit enter and now it actually closes the application, which again, Visual Studio puts this message up here about it's closed. So just to kind of prove something here, we can say +6. Notice it's an integer. So you run this again, then the value is 11 because it truly is an integer that it got from our appsettings.json. So it didn't just grab a string and treat it, call it an integer. No, it actually is an integer. But let's grab the first name and last name. This is a bit more tricky unless you know what's happening. So we're going to say console.writeLine, and let's just put first name and last name. So config.getValue, and we're going to say string, and we're going to say that the user colon first name, and then the suggestions are really trying hard to help me here. Let's go ahead and turn off the suggestions. That should do it. So what we got here is get the value of the first name, and then we'll just do a space, and then we'll do the same thing with the last name, which, yes, is going to be off the screen here, so we could format this. I'll just unpin this. It's fine. So there's our line of code. Actually, there's our code. That's a little better. So now it's going to run and grab the first name and the last name from our user object. Notice that the way to do a sub object, so a user with a property of first name inside of that object, is by saying the parent value and then colon and then the property you want. And you can do that multiple layers deep. So user colon first name, user colon last name. And if we run this, we can see Tim Corey. So we've grabbed the value from our appsettings.json. But wait, there's more. Because what if we have some type of value that is, for whatever reason, secret? This might be a password, or it might be a connection string, or it might be something else that's secret. How would we make sure that we don't put it in our appsettings.json? Because remember, appsettings.json gets committed to our repository if we're using source control, which means that anything that's in here, everyone has access to. So if we have a my secret value, and we were to say, test 1, 2, 3, well, now that gets put in a source control and everyone can see my secret value is test 1, 2, 3, which is not great because that's just not a secure way of doing things. But I do want to take a pause here for a minute and talk about how the settings work for a console application. Wherever a console application is, if the user has access to see the executable, they have access to see the settings. So even if you put in secrets.json, it's not going to entirely help you. It only helps in development and not putting it into source control. But somewhere, wherever this executable runs, there has to be a clear text file that has your data in it. Even if you try to encrypt it, it's only going to be slightly more secure because the executable has to have the decryption ability, which is on the same machine as the encrypted value. So just note that there's a reason why we don't usually put app settings with our executables because of the fact that they're just accessible wherever they are. This isn't as much a problem for a web application because a web application runs on a secure server, but it still has those appsettings.json in a clear text file somewhere. Now, if you run your console application in Azure, well, then you could pull in the Azure settings, the Azure values, and override your appsettings.json and your user secrets. So there's ways of doing this securely, but just note that for development purposes, the way to do it securely is to use an appsettings.json, to use a user secrets file. And a user secrets file, let me show you what it looks like. If you right-click on your project and say user secrets, which I always lose it in this list, manage user secrets, that's why. So in here, this is a brand new JSON file. Notice that if you hover over it, it's not in the same directory as settings demo. So if I hover over appsettings.json, there's the path, see practice, and so on. User secrets is see users, Tim, Corey, app data, roaming, and so on. So this is not going to get stored in source control, which means that I could take my secrets value, I could paste it in here, and I could blank out, or even just delete this key entirely, but let's blank it out for now. I can blank out that value, and now if I were to access my user secrets, this value can override what's in appsettings.json. Let's show off the overriding by first not pulling from user secrets. So let's just say console write line, we're going to say my secret, let's just do it string interpolation. My secret value, and we're going to put colon, and then we'll have our config.get value. It's a string, and again, I forget the actual specific. Is it my secret value? Okay, well, that was easy. I paste that in here, and for right now, let's put a not really there. Okay, just so we have a value here to read from. So if we were to run this right now, well, we'll be able to read that secret value, and it says not really, because we haven't yet hooked up user secrets. But let's hook up user secrets. So at the end of this builder, and it's important the order. So at the end of this, I'm going to take the semicolon away, go to the next line, and say add user secrets. I'm going to say from program. Okay, so it's looking at this particular project because of the fact it's going to look in the properties and find this. And said, okay, that's the idea of where the user secrets is. I'll look now in the roaming app data folder and look for a JSON file that has this in the name. So that's how it finds it. Notice again, if you hover over this, notice how there's a folder called FA19 and so on. And then in there is secrets.json. So that's how it knows to find our particular user secrets. And the way to do that is it says, hey, use a program, because what this is actually doing is saying, hey, we're going to look for where the project is for this particular class. So it goes up to the project level from this particular class. We only have one class, it's called program. So therefore, that's what we use. But we do at the end because this one will override this one. So let's run this again. Remember, it's not really is the value in appsettings.json. And if you run this, it says my secret value is test123 because it overrode the not really with the secrets.json version, which means that we could also now wipe out any value here. I personally like to keep the key there because of the fact that then when you share this repository with somebody else, they know that the key is necessary, but they don't have a value for it that would be sensitive information being passed around. So now I know, hey, I can put this my secret value in secrets.json, populate with a value, and when I do, it will properly run. This is where you put connection strings and other things as well. But again, remember that this works now because I'm in a Visual Studio running it for a test environment. This secrets.json is being a stand-in for whatever secure system you're using to store your real values, whether that is, the environment settings inside of your Azure web app or your Azure app or something else, was Key Vault or whatever else. But this is a stand-in for development where you can store development secret stuff. So with that, that's how we access appsettings.json. We could add additional ones. For example, if we wanted to, we could add another one that would be like development.appsettings.json if you wanted to. Now, I'm not going to, but you could do that. You could add another like environmental variables here. You could add command line, other things that you want to bring in for your secrets or for your settings, and override them based upon the order in which you add them to your configuration builder. The last one is the one that wins. The first one is the one that always loses compared to the others. Now, again, for security purposes, I would encourage you not to put super secret things in your appsettings.json, but instead, this is a great place for configuration. Maybe you have some type of automation system that, when it runs a certain query. Maybe you have a query inside your appsettings.json, or maybe you have a setting there like how often to run, or what things to check. You could put all those things in a appsettings.json file, which means that you can change the appsettings.json file whenever you wanted. And the next time the executable runs, it will get the new value and run those things without having to recompile an application every time you want to tweak a setting. So really valuable to have an appsettings.json in your console application. It's not always necessary, but I find it's very common for it to be necessary, in which case this is a really helpful way of doing that very, very quickly. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.